Thanks very much, Tim, for the introduction. Can you all hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, thanks very much. Today, in this presentation, I want to talk about the geographical imagination of the film Far, Far Away in Cantonese, Santala, 2021 film directed by Amos Wai. In particular, I want to talk about the ways in which the environment is effectively experienced and explored in this film, so as to enable us to think about some of the forces of the Anthropocene and to imagine a different future. So before I turn to the movie, I'd like to talk a bit about some of the terms I'm using in this presentation. By the Anthropocene, I mean an ecological crisis caused by developmentalism and other anthropogenic processes. And by developmentalism, I mean the pursuit of economic development at the cost of human and ecological damage. And thus, ecological crisis requires us to think about an alternative future that inspires hope without easy optimism. And by geographical imagination, I mean the ways in which space is constructed, represented, and identified against or with. And it is important to bear in mind that space is socially produced and can be conceived at different levels, for example, at the level of the household, workplace, city, nation, and global. And space can be understood as open, gendered, or exclusivist, and in terms of home or journey. One can identify with or against place, and identity can be shifting and bounded and contested. Home can mean conflict as well as care and support, and one can become an exile in their homeland, which I'm sure many of us feel right now here in Hong Kong. So another idea I'd like to explore is film as cartography, i.e. film as a form of map making. In the words of Walter Benjamin, film opens up the prison world of our immediate surroundings. In particular, film takes us elsewhere, and with its moving images and multiple camera positions, questions assumptions about the rootedness, boundedness, and locatedness of space and identity. The film spectator is therefore a voyager rather than a voyeur. Film offers an optic, haptic, but also affective experience. In the words of Giuliano Bruno, the film spectator moves across an imaginary path, traversing multiple sites and times, and connects distant moments and far apart places. Film is a mobile mapping of space, heterotopic perspectives, and montage of travel shot with diverse viewpoints and rhythms guide the cinema and its nomadic way of sightseeing. So in other words, film is nomadic, cartographic, and heterotopic. Heterotopia, of course, is a concept right from Foucault's discourse. Heterotopias are sites with multiple layers of meaning that contest the use of space in culture. In particular, heterotopias are characterized by A, deviation from social norms, for example, prisons and psychiatric hospitals, B, juxtaposition of multiple spaces, for example, cinema, and C, evocation of different times, for example, fairgrounds. But film is not just evocative of heterotopias, but also can be thought of as lived space. Film is also about lived space. It is to do with inhabited and habitable places. Film and city, I'm quoting at Bruno, film and city share a dimension of living that Italians call vissuto. That is the space of one's lived experiences. They're about lived space and fantasy of habitable places. They are both inhabited sites and spaces for inhabitation, narrativized by motion. Such types of dwellings always construct a subjectivity. That subjectivity is a body that occupies narrativized space. So the film spectator is not just a voyager, but also a dweller. Space is inscribed with lived experiences, suggesting a sense of self that is embodied and embedded in the environment. Film brings together ideas about travel and dwelling, identity and mobility, suggesting a sense of self that is shifting and unbounded. Brun says, a frame for cultural mapping, film is modern cartography, a voyage of identities in transito, and a complex tour of identifications. These ideas I've been talking about, for example, film as cartography, the spectator as voyager and dweller, space as heterotopia and lived experience, and identity as shifting and unbounded. These ideas can be very usefully brought together by the notion of affective mapping to bear on the geographical imagination of far, far away. The term affective mapping is coined by Jonathan Flatley. It suggests that a work of art creates an affective mapping, i.e. a fictional framework that allows audiences to suspend their usual experience and to experiment with an alternative affective setting. They set aside the usual ways in which the environment is experienced and try to imagine, to experience a different affective setting. So this is the gist of the idea about affective mapping. Let me also say a bit about the term affectivity. I'm using the term in the sense used by Brian Sumi. I think the thrust of bargaining can be very, very nicely is very, very nicely captured by what Sumi says about affectivity, i.e., what the body can do as it goes along. What the body can do as it goes along. So affectivity can create an openness of situations, a margin of maneuverability, a sense of vitality, of vivacity, and also an awareness of how we inhabit uncertainty together, how we inhabit uncertainty together. All right, so let me now turn to the film Far, Far Away. It is a light-hearted but serious attempt to respond to developmentalism as an Anthropocene force, paying special attention to the dominant and exclusivist use of space in Hong Kong, which is dictated both by the logic of capital and the consequences of internal colonialism. The plot is very, very simple. The film revolves around the male protagonist, Ahao, a 28-year-old IT geek whose quest for love takes us to places far, far away, hence the title, the English title. So the film begins with a lecture taking short across the desk to review to review office stationery, items of stationery, a flower and wedding invitation card, and toy tube containing the key to Hao's home as he makes a self-introduction in a demo for a dating app. So it is a romantic comedy. This introduces recurrent motifs such as home and work, roots, identity and mobility, romantic quest, and voyage of self-discovery. The characteristic change of rhythm and direction is suggested here by the toy jeep moving up the train, anticipating the shifts between different levels of space, different understandings of space, household, workplace, city, nation, and the global. Crucial clues embedded in the dialogue and song lyrics suggest that space in the film is contested. Several factors in particular have significantly shaped the use of space in Hong Kong. For example, mainland China's economic domination. So central CBD is dominated by Chinese capital. B, political suppression. For example, Prince Edward is the site of brutal suppression of unarmed civilian protests. And capitalistic mechanisms, which are succinctly captured by a sequence showing the protagonist's daily commute against lyrics about work as drudgery and about women as sexual objects. As a consequence, many young people lack space and privacy for sex because of a housing crisis caused by rampant speculation. The title suggests very, very clearly the young people in Hong Kong find it very, very hard to find the space of intimacy. And also, neighborhoods such as Yatinglai Village are being raised by developers in the name of urban renewal. So, thus dominant and exclusivist use of space dictated as addressed by the logic of capital and the consequences of internal colonialism provides the backdrop against which the story unfolds. And Far, Far Away seeks to counteract developmentalism as an Anthropocene force in a number of ways. For example, the film can be understood as nomadic in sense used by Bruno to stress the spectator as voyager. The film follows cartographically Hao's travels remote corners of the city in his romantic quest. This itinerary takes us to heterotopias in the sense used by Foucault to describe those sites characterized by social deviance, juxtaposed spaces, and different layers of time. The female characters in the film all live in places that are geographically isolated and socially marginal. For example, Lei Jiwo is a remote, largely deserted Hakka village, accessible only on foot. Daingo and Sato are both closed traffic except for motorists with a permit. The boat ride to Chongqing Sandy Ranch takes longer than the flight to Taipei. In popular imagination, Satogok is associated with freakishness and Sandy Ranch with ruin and decay. In particular, Baklai is associated with Fleur, a 28-year-old woman who is described by her cousin as being unbearable for dressing like a little girl and for being proactive in dating. Because of its association with this deviant figure, Baklai becomes a heterotopia that contests the dominant use of space in Hong Kong. This is brought out very, very clearly in the sequence set in Chaguoleng, another heterotopia in the film. As a heterotopic space evocative of different times and places, Chaguoleng is effectively captured through dialogue, editing, and cinematography. So an aerial shot of the present Chaguoleng is accompanied by voiceover informing us about its past as a mining area. This is followed by a close-up of a faded photograph showing the last British governor, Chris Patten, visiting the place. Then we see Hao discussing his state with Fleur with his best friend at the cafe in Chaguoleng. There's intercut with flashbacks of Hao and Fleur enjoying the sunset at Baklai. There, Fleur protests, "It's beautiful and romantic here. Sometimes I don't understand you people. You say you're fighting for democracy and freedom. Why can't I just live the way I want to? Why can't I live at Baklai? Why can't I dress like this? Why can't I be proactive in dating guys?" So standing up to the gender bias of normative culture, Fleur stresses that self-determination lies at the heart of ethics and politics. The sunset at Baklai symbolizes not only Fleur's love of nature and sense of independence, but also heterotopia, a counter-site that contests the use of space in a capitalist society under internal colonialism. But Chaguoleng can also be understood as a lived space. The protagonist, Hao, moved to live with his grandparents in Chaguoleng at 5 when his mother passed away. The cafe was frequented by Hao and his best friend. In his second year at university, Hao participated in pro-democracy protests in Mongkok, and in the aftermath of political suppression, fell down the dumps. So Chaguoleng is inscribed with Hao's memories of caring grandparents, lasting friendships, and political activism. Moreover, a sense of community is suggested by empty shots of an NGO providing support and services for the neighborhood. But despite its 400-year history, Chaguoleng will likely be demolished to make way for urban renewal. Like many other places, Chaguoleng is subjected to the relentless force of a capitalist society under internal colonialism. The mention of the rocks of fertility at Chaguoleng prompted a deep reference to the political repression following the pro-democracy protests that began in 2019. We would want to bring China into this world we are living in, unless we can move to another country. The protagonist, Hao, moved to Jiangguanou shortly after university graduation when his grandparents passed away and his father remarried and had family in mainland China. Because of his fraught relationship with his absent father, Hao's Jiangguanou home is associated with familial conflict. So home can mean conflict as well as care and support. Hao's colleague A. Li moves back to Satogok from Prince Edward, part because it is associated, Prince Edward is associated with the brutality of political suppression. The film shows not only inhabited places, but also characters in search of habitable places, and so doing suggests a sense of self as being shifting and unbounded. This is brought to the fore in final sequence when Hao takes his love interest, Melanie, major flat he rents near her home. There, Ahau declares his love for Melanie. And echoing Fleur, Ahau says emphatically, I know exactly what I want. With his new self-understanding, Ahau pursues his own pathway to personal growth. He leaves his Geographical home and reconciles with his absent father. He becomes more communicative, so he plans to exchange messages in Morse code with Melanie through lamps. Remember, this is a romantic comedy. So he also decides to create his own home with Melanie, one that is open and unbounded. On the subject of migration, the where is not most important, Ahau says. Most important is who you go with. So this sense of opening and willingness to explore is effectively captured at the end of the film by the camera zooming out to an aerial view of the kissing couple. Such a shift in levels of space is typical of the film as it traverses household, workplace, city, nation, and the globe. To conclude, Far, Far Away seeks to counteract developmentalism as an anthropogenic force, not by creating utopian or apocalyptic scenarios, but by providing an effective mapping for the spectator as both voyager and dweller of lived and heterotopic spaces. The film shows cartographically not only inhabited places, but also characters in search of habitable places, suggesting the sense of self as being shifting and unbounded. And finally, the film also offers an effective exploratory experience of environment that suggests a sense of agency that is reflective, anticipatory, and responsive to the uncertainty of the Anthropocene without being moralistic or falsely optimistic. Okay, so these are references. Thanks very much.